Hello everyone, today we're going to go over the custom plane generation for the Skalarki Standalone Driver. Now before we get started, I want to mention a few things. The first thing I want to say is that this is not for the faint of heart. If you are not comfortable manipulating files, I would highly recommend that you stay away from this. This is more geared towards people that have an understanding of programming and that have an understanding of how flight simulation works in terms of its variables. Now I'm going to go through as much as I can with this to try to make it as easy and simple as possible, but there's a couple things to note. At no time will DFlight support this. This is something you will do on your own. We will assist you with this video to get you going, but other than that, there is no support for this, as it is a custom made project, and therefore we can't support it, and therefore we will not warranty it either. So before we get started, you're going to need Excel. This potentially could be done in other spreadsheet software, but Excel has been optimized for this. When you first open the file that is sent to you when you purchase the do-it-yourself module, you're going to see the following screen. Now each area contains a number of things, and we're going to go over each one and how it's going to work. The first area is your ID, and how this ID works is it actually is meant for the program to know exactly which number you are associating a button or an LED with. So do not change this. It is going to be locked in your version, so do not change this. Even if you were to unlock the sheet somehow or unlock this area, do not change this. They will go in order, as you can see. For some reason, if it does get changed, just make sure it's in order, starting at number 1. The variable source is going to be where we're going to put the actual variable that is controlled by the plane. And we're going to go through that in a little more detail here in a bit. I do want to mention something else. If you highlight over the tabs, it actually will tell you what each item is. So as you can see, it says variable source. This is where you can find the different variables. It gives you the website. It also shows you, of course, it's the ID, not to touch it. And we're going to go through each one. So the variable source will be, again, the actual variable, like the event or the LVAR, for example, is a key phrase we're going to be using a lot, or something called an HTML event. And any one of those events can be used with the plane, which a majority of most events on most planes use those 3. So the next one is the type. And the type is going to be, as you can see, a custom variable that is set by the application, an H event as we went over, a SimConnect event, and an LVAR event. And you can see the write and read values can be shown, and you can find them online. Otherwise, it'll be a custom LVAR, which we will also go over. Most of these variables can be found by using a software such as Spad.neXt and a data monitor to get that information if you need to. You can also, if you're familiar with the SimConnect SDK, there is a way to also get that information from the developer mode. Again, this is more complex, but you will need to know which events that you're trying to control, and the only way you can get those is through a program such as I mentioned, through Spad.neXt, or some active monitoring program that monitors what's coming in. The unit is relatively important, and the unit is going to come from a specific output that you're trying to accomplish from the event, and we'll explain that as we go through that. The read or write, generally most of the LEDs are going to be read, most of the displays are going to be read, and most of the buttons are going to be write. Now there are some situations where the plane also provides a read and write variable that can be used for both the button press and providing the LED status. The power type is very important, and Generally, you're going to use this for when you want the displays and LEDs to come on. And it essentially disables or enables the LED or display as well. So if you put in a specific power type, it's not going to pass information to it only if the power type is selected, which we're going to go over here in a minute. The category is relatively self-explanatory. You do not want to ever touch this. Again, it is tied to the ID, and you'll see that the category is self-explanatory. The button type. We have a number of different button types, which are very important, and again, we're going to go over those as we get to button types. And then we have the custom variable, which is going to be very convoluted probably and difficult to understand until we actually go through it. But again, if you click on it, it'll give you a note, and you can read over the note to explain how you actually use the custom variable. And then probably the most important thing is the notes. And the notes on the right is what actually tells you what it's controlling. Also, again, that is tied to the ID, so you do not want to ever touch that. All right, so we're going to get started with the first thing. We have the first 10 IDs are going to be your power. It's going to be your main power, your battery power, and your delayed power. Now, you can utilize either both of the power. Let's say you have two different variables that control the power, or you have two different ways in which you want to control the power. You can actually put them in either one of these slots. And you have, again, battery power, same thing, and delayed power, same thing. So for example, we're going to open up the Excel spreadsheet that was made for the fly-by-wire. Okay, so as you can see, we opened up the Excel spreadsheet that was made for the fly-by-wire. And they use an LVAR for AC_1. That is the variable that is used to indicate when the main power is on. They also have two batteries, which can be used here, and that is the variable for when it is battery power. Now, you could use delayed power, and what delayed power basically means is an additional function there that tells the simulator that the power to the plane has been on, but it has a delay before it actually turns on. So that's what that basically explains. So we're going to go back to the blank one, and we're going to actually copy and paste this so we can show you how this actually works. All right, so we're back at the blank spreadsheet. Now, you'll notice the type here says SimConnect. Anytime you put an L and a colon, it's going to automatically change it to an LVAR. Anytime you put an H and a colon, it's going to change it to an H event. If you don't put those prefixes in front, it's going to think it is a SimConnect event. So for example, if we paste the one we just looked at, it's going to make it an LVAR automatically. Now, any LVAR that is used, whether it is a write, a rewrite, or a read value, must have an accompanied unit. Now, again, the unit can be found by going to this website right here. Okay, so when you go to that website, you're going to see all of the different units here on the left, and you can use any one of these units. And they're pretty self-explanatory. As long as you type them in exactly how they are, it will work, as you can see. So for this LVAR that we're about to do, this is just going to be something that provides us with an on and off. And what they call that in programming language is a bool. So we're going to type in a bool. And what that means is it's going to have either an on or off value. It's not going to have any other value. And it's going to be a bool value. All of the power are going to be read values. We're reading from our variable source, which essentially says, hey, is the power on or off? So that's going to be a read value. You're not going to want to put anything for the power type because this is the power. So you're going to want to make sure that those are all set to none. Now you'll notice that anything that is grayed out is not functional. So the same thing goes for all of your variables, and this is very important. If you're not going to use a variable, you must type in NA. And as we type in NA, it's going to clear out the type, and therefore it's not going to be used. So anything you don't use, you must make sure that you put NA as the variable type. Okay, the next one's power category, as we mentioned, is power, and then our button type. Now, this is not a button, so we don't have to put anything in here. And this is also not a custom variable, it's a direct bool. So we don't have to do anything more with this. So that is the power. Now we're going to type in an NA and we're going to bring it all the way down to our plain recall time. Now plain recall time is something that we do need to put a custom variable in. And what the plain recall time is this is when you want the plane, once you've hit ready to fly, how long you want it to wait until you want to sync your hardware and your LEDs. Now generally, you're going to want to set this to roughly 3 or 4 seconds. You'll have to play with this depending on the plane. Now for its variable source, it doesn't matter. I just type in recall or plain recall because it's not going to even read that. So it really doesn't matter, but you do need to make sure that you do put something there. Now again, this is not going to be a bool. This is actually going to be a number. So you need to type in numbers for the plain recall time. Now we're going to go to button type. Again, it's not a button. And this is where we put the custom variable in. This is going to be how many seconds we want to use. So for this example, we're going to put 4. Now you know that it's there because it's going to turn green. You can just ignore the error that pops up. The next one is just an extra miscellaneous, so we're not going to touch that. Now the power switch is what comes from the RMPs. This is what tells you when the power switch is on or off. Again, we're going to skip this just for now. But we're going to go down to the LEDs and the displays. The next one is an LED. So the LED, of course, works off of a similar thing as the AC bus power, right? It's just an LED, so it's going to be reading from an LED. So we're going to come over here, we're going to put an L in, and we're going to go back to our fly-by-wire, and you'll see that we have, this is the variable for our brakes hot LED. Okay, so we're going to say copy. We're going to come back and we're going to paste that here. And again, this is a bool. So we're going to say bool. We're going to go down to power type. Now this is when you want to use the power type, because do we want the brakes hot LEDs to come on all the time, or do we want them to come on during only certain periods of the plane's power? Now in this case, we're just going to put in main. Okay, now that's going to be the main AC power. There's also battery, and there's also delayed, as we went over up here. Now there's also the none feature. Now if you type in none, it's going to always be on and off. So what that means is if you don't put a power type here, whenever the brakes hot LED comes on and off, even if the plane is off or on, it's going to always illuminate. Now some planes, that variable here doesn't look at the power, so therefore it's just going to always come on and off. So you want to make sure that you put the power type here. So for example, it's going to be main. Now again, this is not a button, so we don't have to worry about that, and it's also not a custom variable. So this is really all you need to do for LEDs is the variable type. It's generally going to be an LVAR, but of course it could be a SimConnect. Bool is going to be pretty typical for every LED, and it's power type. Okay, so we're going to come down here and you'll notice we have brake fan toggle. We also have buttons. We also have up and down. We also have selects. We're going to go through the different types. But every toggle will have an on, an off, and an is on as its readable value. So how this works is the toggle will read off of the on. And what it will do is it will toggle back and forth based on what you put here in the brake fan is on. Now you also have a brake fan on and off. Now what we call these are discrete functions. What that means is when you push the brake fan button, it's going to send an on command when it's pressed in and an off command when it's pressed off. And you have the ability to set that as well if you'd like. You can use any one of these or just one of them if you want. You can use all of them. They're all going to work the same way. So we're going to demonstrate the brake fan toggle on the fly-by-wire. So if we go back to our fly-by-wire and we go to brake fan toggle, it's right here, brake fan pressed. That is what they use. Now we're going to bring it over here and we're going to put it right there. Now again, it's an LVAR, so any LVAR has got to have a unit. Doesn't matter if it's a button or we're reading it. And we're just going to call it a bool. because again, it's just doing off or on. Power type. Now you could put a power type here if you don't want the button to function when the plane is off. But generally most buttons, including switches on planes, function, they just don't do anything. So that's up to you if you want to put a power type. I'm going to keep that as none. And now we get to the important part, and that is the button type. There is a number of button types. You click on the drop down, you're going to have a button, direct, reverse direct, toggle, reverse toggle, axis, pot, increment, decrement, and value. Now, depending on the type of button it is and what you're trying to accomplish, this is where you're going to put in what you're doing. Now, this is going to be a toggle because we're going to toggle back and forth between on and off. Now, let's say we weren't. Let's say we were just going to be pushing a button that gets pushed in, and that's all it does. You push the button, it does something. Push the button, it does something. For a toggle, it's actually going to go back and forth. It's going to go on, then it's going to go off as you push it. So in this case, we're going to call this a toggle. And that's where a toggle type comes in. Now let's say you have a button that when you push it on, it actually sends a signal to turn it off. This happens in certain things. If you look at an overhead on the fly-by-wire, they have a flaps on button that when you push it in, it turns on, and when you push it off, it turns off. But then it's got a terrain when you push it in, it turns on, and you pull it out and it turns off. Now there's also another type, and that is the reverse toggle. Now the reverse toggle works the opposite way, and what it does is it looks at the brake fan is on and does the opposite. And what I mean by that is there are some buttons, they're specifically, I would call the GPWS buttons in the overhead, that have 4 buttons: terrain, system, landing flaps, I believe, and when you push them in, they turn off, and when you push them out, they turn on. And then there's another button that does the opposite. So that's when you would use a reverse toggle. It's not something that is used very often. You'll have to kind of experiment with how the reverse toggle actually works. We have a couple others. We have what's called direct and reverse direct. And what direct does is it actually takes whatever signals coming from the Skalarki hardware, for example a button, and directly sends whatever that number is. Now what I mean by that is when you push a button on Skalarki and you release it, there's 2 different signals. There's the push and there's the release. Now most buttons are going to have the ability to know whether or not you push or release them depending on the plane. For example, the Phoenix has, when you push a button in, it knows when you push it in, and when you release it, it knows when you release it. So what a direct does is it literally takes whatever you're doing with the button and sends the signal. It's a little different than a toggle or a button, because a toggle is just going to toggle back and forth, 0 and 1, dependent on if it's on or off. Whereas direct is going to send whatever you're sending directly to the plane. There's also reverse direct, very rare, but in these cases, when you push a button in, it's actually going to send a signal to tell that you're pushing a button out. Again, something that's not used very often. We'll go through axis and the rest of these as we go through, but in this case, this is a toggle. This is a brake fan toggle. So we're going to come to toggle. Now, because it's a toggle, it doesn't know when the button's actually enabled or not, so it needs to know by using the is on. Anytime you use a toggle, you're more than likely going to need to tell it when it's on, so that way it doesn't toggle back and forth. It only toggles to where you need it to go. You'll see if we go back to our brake fan toggle, there is an associated read value right here to tell you when the fan is actually on or off. So we're going to click on that, we're going to copy it, and again it is also a bool, and it doesn't need a button type or a custom variable. So here we go, we have a brake fan toggle done. There's nothing more that needs to be done. You've associated what it does when you hit the button, and you've associated what it's going to read when you are doing the toggle. Now let's just do the gear up and down, because the gear up and down is going to be two separate values, right? There's a gear down and there's a gear up. Now there's no toggling going on with this. So if we go back to fly-by-wire, you're going to see we have a SimConnect value. Now remember, all SimConnect values do not have an L in front of them. So the SimConnect value is going to be gear down and gear up. And we know that because if we go to the website that is shown in the notes, you can actually get the SimConnect values. So we'll come over here, and there we go. We got write and read values. Now if we go to that website, this is going to give you all the event IDs, and here they are. And you're going to type them in exactly as they show. Now we're doing gear up and down. So we have a gear up and we have a gear down. And again, you can use this however you'd like. So we're going to say gear up and gear down. And we go back here, and remember, it needs to be typed in exactly as it showed on that website with the underscore. Now these are SimConnect values, and because they're SimConnect values, we do not need to put a unit in. You can if you'd like, but you don't need to. Also, power type. Do we want the gear to go up and down when we don't have the power on? Well, that's completely up to you. Most people would like to see the actual gear handle going up and down when the plane is off. So if that's the case, you're going to want to keep this as none. Now, again, this is a singular button. This is not a toggle, right? We're just sending gear up or down. Now, in that case, we're just going to call this a button, because all we're doing is sending it a single signal, and that's essentially what button does. Button just says, hey, I'm sending the signal, send it. We're not toggling back and forth. We're just sending one signal and one signal only. Okay? So that is your button. Okay, so the next one is a little more complex. Now, there'll be a note that'll give you a format for the custom variable. So this is our format for the auto brake. Now, if the plane provides you discrete low, medium, and max buttons, you would put it in here. So for example, let's say we had auto brake low, and it's a SimConnect. We would make it into a button, and that's all we would need to do, and then it would work as so. But most planes have a select variable or an LVAR with a select, and that is the case with the fly-by-wire. So we're going to copy and paste what they're using, which is the auto brake arm mode set. Again, all LVARs need to have a unit. Now this time it is not going to be a bool, because it is not going to be 1 or 0, or in this case true or false. It's going to be a number of different values. And what we do with those is we say numbers. Okay? Now again, power type's the same way. Do we want the auto brakes to be selected when the power is off or on? Well, in this case, generally you're not going to be able to do it anyways, so there's no reason to put a power type here. Now, because it's a button type that is sending multiple signals, it is not sending a button. It is not sending a toggle. It's also not sending a direct, right? We're not sending, when we push the button in, we want to send the auto brakes to a specific 1 or 0 or pressed or released. We need to actually send it a number, because this is what it uses. It uses a number. So what we're going to use for that is something called value. Okay? Now value is going to send a specific number to this variable based on our custom variable layout. Now you'll see we have off, low, medium, and max as our custom variable. Now in this case, because I've used fly-by-wire, this is its syntax. Okay, so off is a 0, low is a 1, medium is a 2, and max is a 3. And therefore it's going to send off 0 because it's telling it it's a value, 1, 2, and 3, and you then do not need to program any of these auto brake buttons because it's just going to use the selector. And that is how we use custom variables with a value for a select. Okay, so that's another type of button. Now you'll see as we go down, there's quite a few of these. One of the most noticeable ones is going to be your IRS switch. Same format, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to put value here, and it's going to be 0, 1, and 2, or 2, 3, and 5, whatever the plane requests for this. Now if we keep going down, you're going to see some other things such as knobs. Now most of the knobs are using an axis value, and we'll explain how the axis value works now. Okay, so now we're going to do the cockpit selector knob. Now the cockpit selector knob is an LVAR. It uses numbers again, but this time this is an axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to call it an axis. And in our custom variable, what we're going to do is we're going to put the minimum and maximum value of this knob. Now in this case, if you again would need some type of program like Spad.neXt or some other program that provides this information to give you the minimum and max, otherwise you wouldn't know what it is. So in this case, we know based on, again, looking at Spad or another program, that its minimum value is 0. Now we know its maximum value is 300. So what you'll do is you'll put a range, 0 to 300. And that's it. That's how you use axes. Levers are going to be axes. Your throttle levels are going to be axes. You're going to need to put the minimum and the maximum value that the plane accepts. Otherwise, it's not going to scale properly. You can also use negative values. So for an example, some values in Flight Sim, you might have seen this before, are negative 386 through 16386. So you can do that. However, if you do use a negative value, you're going to need to put them within parentheses, like an accounting page, and remove the negative. And that's how you do negative variables. Okay? There's another thing that you can do, and that is send direct buttons based on their value. So we're going to go back up to our auto brake. And remember how we had an auto brake select, and that is the format in which we had it? Well, we could also do this. You could also take the arm set here, put that here. Again, it is a number. You can make it into a button, and you can put a 0 here. So that's another way you can do it. And by doing this, when you hit this button, it's going to send a 0. So for example, we could just copy and paste this all the way down, but it's easier just to have the auto brakes selector on one single signal, and therefore you can just send a 0, a 1, or a 2, as you can see. And that's what the custom variable is for. In this case, we would NA it, we would get rid of it, because now we're not going to be using it anymore, because we are now using the auto brake min, max, and low as discrete numbers. So that is another way that you can use the custom variables. We also have the potentiometer, and the potentiometer is a little more tricky than what we've shown here. So let's go to one of the lights here. Let's go to our exterior lights, and let's say we want to do runway lights on. Okay, we type in light potentiometer. Now all light potentiometers require a ID and a value. So for this case, again, this is a SimConnect, and you can just type in light potentiometer on the left here. You don't have to type anything else. This is a special type that's built in. And again, power type, up to you. But now, instead of doing a button, we're going to do what's called a pot. Now, again, these are something you won't use very often. Most planes have the ability to send direct signals, such as the runway lights. But in order to use a pot, you need to give it its ID, which let's just say it was 40. Then you're going to do hashtag. Then you do the range. So what this means is light potentiometer number 40, we want to increase a range between 0 and 100. And because this is a runway lights switch, we are not going to utilize the range. We are just going to send it, let's say 50%. We would put a 50 in here. Now if this was an axis, we would put the range in there. We'd put 0 to whatever, 100. So that is how you use potentiometers. Now all of this again is explained in pretty good detail. If you click on show hide note, it explains essentially what I just explained to you and how it all works. There are some cases where you might do multi-values, where you have multiple values you want to send. There are sometimes values you want to have a range, as we discussed. And if we go to button type, you will see it tells you what all the buttons do and what they do. So as you can see, the button sends a 1 or a custom value. A toggle sends a 1 and 0, and toggles the opposite. And it essentially just goes over what each one of these type of button types are. In most cases, most planes are going to use one of these. I haven't found a plane that doesn't use one of these type of values. So that is it. That is how you make a custom plane file. Now, a couple things you got to make sure. Again, you have to put all of the blanks need to have an NA, or else it will not work. So make sure you do that. You will get an error right away as you try to load this in. You'll see there's 1,400 different values here, and you can go through each one of them, and it explains essentially what everyone is. If you go to the radio, for example, it'll show you the different frequencies, and you put in a different frequency for each one. So here is the most important part. When you are done, you want to save this as a CSV file. Okay, and it's going to be custom CSV. We're going to say save, and now we have a CSV file. Okay, so once you've got your custom CSV, you're going to come up here and you're going to type in the following: C- or whatever your main Windows drive is, program data. It is hidden by default, so you must type it in. You're going to then go to deflight, SA driver, planes, and this is where we're going to find all the other planes and our plane list. So you're going to take your custom, you're going to drag it in there, and that's it. Once you've activated your custom plane, and to do that, I'll show you how to do that. We're going to open up the SA driver. Just like you activate any other plane is the same way you activate the custom plane. All right, so we go to setup, we go to planes, and you're going to see a button up here called custom plane. You click on that, and that is how you activate the custom plane. Once you've activated that, your custom plane that you made will be active and usable. All right, so that is it. That is how you make a custom plane file. Again, it will take you a while. There's going to be a lot of troubleshooting back and forth. Every time you put in a new file, you will have to reload the software, as it doesn't update until you reload the software. So when you put your custom.csv into the folder, you're going to want to then restart the Skalarki driver. You won't have to restart Microsoft Flight Simulator, but you'll have to restart the driver. All right, so that is how you do the do-it-yourself planes for the Skalarki Standalone Driver. Appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions, the best place for that will be our support portal and our Discord channel. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day.